Ada Blackjack did not set out to become a symbol of survival. She was not trained for exploration, nor selected for endurance. She was hired because she needed money. In 1921, a small Arctic expedition sailed toward Wrangel Island, a remote and uninhabited landmass in the Chukchi Sea, north of Siberia. She was employed as a seamstress and cook. Her name was Ada Blackjack. Wrangel Island is not forgiving terrain. It is locked in ice for most of the year, battered by polar winds, and isolated by vast stretches of frozen ocean. The ground remains frozen beneath a thin, active layer of soil. Vegetation is sparse. Winter temperatures regularly fall below -40 degrees Celsius. There are polar bears. There is no shelter that is not built by human hands. Survival there depends entirely on preparation, cooperation, and supply lines that cannot fail. The expedition's purpose was political. By occupying the island, the team hoped to establish British sovereignty. The men were young, ambitious, and inexperienced. Ada was Inupiat, born in Alaska, and had grown up with knowledge of cold climates, though not conditions this extreme. She spoke little English. She suffered from tuberculosis. She agreed to go because she needed wages to pay for medical care for her young son, Bennett, who remained behind in Alaska. When the expedition landed in September 1921, they unloaded supplies and built a small shelter from driftwood and salvaged materials. The ship departed, leaving 5 people behind with the promise of resupply the following year. From the beginning, the situation was fragile. The men underestimated the environment. They relied on imported food rather than hunting. They lacked sufficient Arctic experience. Ada was expected to cook, sew clothing, and maintain the living space. She was not considered a decision-maker. Darkness descended for months. The temperature dropped. Wind scarred the island relentlessly. Fuel became precious. Food stocks dwindled faster than anticipated. The men grew weaker. Morale deteriorated. Polar bears approached the camp, drawn by smell and movement. Ada learned quickly that fear had no practical value. She focused on tasks. She mended clothing repeatedly as fabric wore thin. She cooked what little food remained. She observed. By the second year, the situation became critical. The promised resupply ship did not arrive. Scurvy began to take hold. The men, unaccustomed to Arctic hunting, struggled to secure fresh meat. Their bodies weakened, their decision-making suffered. Ada, who had not been trained as a hunter, began to learn out of necessity. She watched, she practiced, she adapted. She used a rifle despite fear of recoil and noise. She learned to skin animals, preserve meat, and ration carefully. One by one, the men deteriorated. In January 1923, 3 of them made the decision to attempt a desperate journey across the ice toward Siberia to seek help. It was a calculated risk driven by inevitability. They left behind Ada and one remaining man, Lorne Knight, who was already gravely ill. The men who departed were never seen again. The Arctic absorbed them without record. Ada was now responsible for a dying companion in an environment designed to erase human presence. Knight was bedridden, unable to contribute. Ada fed him, cleaned the shelter, hunted for food, and defended herself against polar bears that wandered close to camp. She kept a journal, not for reflection, but for record. Her entries were factual. They noted weather, hunting success, illness, and daily labor. There is no evidence of self-pity in her writing. There is no dramatization. There is only persistence. Knight died in June 1923. Ada buried him as best she could in frozen ground. From that point forward, she was entirely alone on Wrangel Island. No human voice remained. No assistance was coming. She did not know whether rescue would ever arrive. She continued anyway. Survival became a matter of routine. She woke. She checked traps. She hunted seals and birds. She dried meat. She repaired clothing. She reinforced the shelter. She kept watch for polar bears. She managed fuel carefully. Every task required energy she could not afford to waste. Mistakes could not be corrected by anyone else. Injury would be fatal. Illness would be terminal. Psychological isolation under such conditions is difficult to quantify. There were no distractions, no confirmation of existence, no shared language. Time lost its structure beyond weather and hunger. Ada maintained order through repetition. She kept schedules. She recorded days. She treated survival as work rather than ordeal. There is no evidence she believed herself heroic. There is no evidence she expected recognition. It was an American vessel sent to investigate rumors of the expedition's failure. Ada was found alive, dressed in clothing she had sewn herself from scavenged materials and animal skins. She was malnourished but functional. She had endured nearly 6 months alone after the last death. The men were gone. The expedition had failed. The political objective was abandoned. Ada was brought back to Alaska. Newspapers briefly took interest in her survival. The framing was often dismissive. She was described as lucky, passive, incidental. The deaths of the men were treated as the central tragedy. Her endurance was treated as an anomaly. She returned to a life marked by poverty and illness. The wages she had been promised were reduced. The public attention faded quickly. She struggled to secure medical care. She did not seek fame. She did not lecture. She did not write a memoir. She lived quietly. Ada Blackjack died in 1983, decades after the Arctic had released her. For most of her life, her story remained marginal, overshadowed by narratives of male exploration and imperial ambition. Only later did historians revisit the facts. Only later was it acknowledged that the sole long-term survivor of the Wrangel Island expedition was the person least expected to endure it. Her survival does not fit comfortably into traditional narratives. It is not a story of conquest. It is not a story of preparation rewarded. It is a story of someone excluded from authority who nonetheless assumed responsibility when authority collapsed. She survived not because she was chosen, but because she adapted when others could not. Ada Blackjack did not defeat the Arctic. She did not master it. She endured it long enough to be noticed again. Her survival was not loud. It did not announce itself. It was carried out through daily labor, repeated decisions, and refusal to stop moving while the environment waited patiently for her to fail. She was not alone by choice. She did not seek isolation. That she survived says less about heroism than about obligation to a child who needed her, to tasks that still needed doing, to a body that continued to function despite fear and fatigue. The Arctic did not spare her. It simply did not finish her. Her story remains because it offers no reassurance. It does not suggest that endurance guarantees reward. It shows only that survival can occur without recognition, without preparation, and without witnesses. And that sometimes, the most complete collapse of a plan reveals the person who was never meant to carry it yet did.